Welcome back to Invested, everyone. Taking a question, and it's a very simple question in nature, but if you really kind of unbox it and unpack it, it can get very complicated because there's a lot of different factors that plays into this. Why do many abandoned properties sit vacant for years or decades? I live in a 100,000 population New England city, but this isn't unique to here. There are properties and storefronts which have been empty for years, many even for decades. Why does this happen? Who owns these buildings? They're not listed publicly or leased or sale. Why wouldn't the owner try to get some type of business or residential use for their property? As someone who wants to start a business, it drives me nuts to see all these empty spots just wasting away. I get it. It's just common sense. It's a funny story. When I traveled to Napa and I was just, going to wine country and doing certain things, we ate, we drank some wine, we got some cheese and, the stuff that you get, right? And I got a little trash, but then we couldn't finish it all. So we close it up and of course we do it in the trash. And then before we took off, the designated driver had to go use the restroom. So I was just waiting around and I found these two ladies. They're middle-aged ladies. And, they're clean. They look proper. Was digging through the trash and they ended up taking my grilled vegetables and some cheese and other things out of the garage. And they took it, opened it, and ate it. I was freaking out. I was like, what the hell? Like, who are they homeless? Like, do they need help? So I followed them. And they get into this brand new E-Class Mercedes and they drive off. So I explained that to my friend. And he goes, yeah, that's the trend. It's called garbage dumping or dumpster diving or something like to that degree. And it was like a trending factor in San Francisco. To me, it's a hygiene issue. But their philosophy is they don't want things to go waste. Like, why would throw away good grilled vegetables if you can, repurpose it, right? So maybe that's a bad analogy, but it's the same philosophy of what you're thinking. So let me try to unpack and, kind of explain to you a few factors that might lead to property sitting vacant for years or decades. So depending on the asset itself, right, it's been vacant for a long period of time. So I'll kind of use an example. I'm not sure if they were Kmarts in New England, but there were Kmarts when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s here in California. I mean, that's where you went to go get your soccer cleats, your baseball. I mean, you just went there, right? Like just like Big Five, you just came around a lot of affordable stuff. I didn't grow up rich. I grew up very humble beginnings. So, if we needed something, we had to get used ones, or we couldn't go to Chicks or Dick's because that's too expensive. So we went to like Big Five or we went to Kmart. So now Kmart, that model just kind of went away. So all these locations that had Kmarts before now is sitting empty. And sometimes they'll take the box and someone will buy it empty or divide it up and start putting junior boxes in there. We call it junior boxes. Like instead of having like a 40,000 square foot, they cut it up into two, rent it to, let's just use today's example, Harbor Freight, and then you put it, to Five Below, things like that. Now, Five Below, they don't take 20,000, but let's call it like Petco or something like that, so that they repurposed it. So, but there are some even vacant malls these days. There's something called deadmalls.com. I mean, it's been unused and is sitting vacant for a very long time. And your thought is, well, you could get anyone in there is probably better, right? But think of it this way. If you had an older product, like let's say that was built in the 50s, I'm not saying anything built in the 50s are bad, but it's just older. So it's how well you maintained it. So now when these properties sit vacant for a very long time, now there was an interested party like you wants to start a business, they want to take it. That's great for the landlord, for the lessor, the building owner, whatever you call it. And be like, hey, this is the rates. Oh, well, I'm just starting off. I can only pay you, I'm just throwing out a number, $10 a square foot per year. Okay, but because you have a new business coming in, you're going to operate, there's two things I can do. I can say, hey, you need to be responsible for all building compliance, building regulation, ADA. ADA stands for American Disability Act. So if 50s buildings are not today's standard, right? So they might have to do a ramp, ADA bathroom, gender neutral bathrooms, whatever it may be. So then that's going to be monetary cost. So if that building is 5,000 square foot, you're willing to pay $10 a square foot. What is it going to cost me to get that space ready for you to lease it at $10 a square foot? It could cost me $100 a square foot. So then you do a 5-year deal. What would I be making money or losing money? I'll be losing money. So the landlord or the building owner doesn't make economic sense to do that deal, right? Or you can say, well, how about they charging me more rent? Well, then also you're a new business. What's the viability of that? Like you being successful, being able to pay me higher rent for longer duration. You could, but that's the risk I take because I have to come up with $100 a square foot today to get you ready to operate and get $10 a square foot per year. That's a 10-year return if you do that. But if you pay $20, it's a 5-year return, but I'm still out of money for 5 years. So these rule not as densely populated. You're going to have less population. You say 100,000. Well, I mean, there's 16 million people in LA County, right? So this is why certain tier 1 or we call gateway cities are real estate and things are more expensive because there's a higher demand. So if something would vacant, I have a higher probability of being able to lease that quickly as possible. And if I lease it quickly as possible, people use it, they repair it, I put a little bit more money. The income stream doesn't stop. So then I can maintain that building better over time. But if it was vacant for 10 years, the re-letting cost of that is cost prohibited. That's one factor. And second factor is population. You say you have 100K population in New England City, and that's not unique here. Some other cities may have smaller population or slightly within that area. But then why is that building vacant? Because the business there cannot operate or was not financially feasible to operate, so they left. So they don't think the landlord wanted someone else to come in. But guess what? There may not be enough business to take spaces there. And I'll give you an example. In South Texas, cities such as like McAllen or Edinburgh or even like Mission, Pampa, Brownsville. They're South Texas, they're border. If you go there, most people think, oh, it's border town, things are going to be cheap. They're not. The reason why it's not cheap is not because there's such a robust economy. I mean, there's some form of economy, but as an example, it's not Manhattan, right? It's not Chicago. It's not Miami. That doesn't mean people don't live there. It's not a vibrant, there's not wealth to be made there. There is. But because of the population and the limited possibility of the users, they don't overdevelop. So guess what? If you're looking for a space, hey man, you may not have many options. You may have to go to the corner. I'm a mom and pop. I tell you, it's going to be $10 my way or the highway. And you might have to take that because you have no other options. That's why certain areas, it's not a robust economy. You just have low inventory, right? So that's misleading information. So you have to kind of understand that market. So here is low population. So these buildings may not have the right users to take that space. And if there were, they might go to a better building, better location. So the buildings that are in between that's not chosen are going to sit there idle, right? And also they're like, okay, then you can repurpose that as housing. Well, the zoning comes into play, right? So if it's a C1 zoning, ML12 or, whatever, MX2, something to that degree, you have to go to the city and get rezoned and get a variance or do a new surveys. That costs money. Maybe this individual doesn't have that enough money to do so either. And that's why they leave it empty. And you'll think, if it's empty, wouldn't the bank take it over or something like that because they're not making money? Well, you also have to learn the history. What if this property was in the family for 3 generations and it was passed down to this individual? Their cost basis might be 0. So they don't really have any expenses. Therefore, just keeping it empty and might be cheaper and hoping that one day their grandkids or grandkids in this area economically bloom, they pass that asset down and who knows, it becomes a vibrant city with 1 million people, right? At that point, the building is worthless at that point. The land might be worth more than what it is today. So that's why they just keep it that way. So it's more like a land bank. So when you see a building that is vacant, it might be in good condition, right? But you don't know. It might be MEP, copper's been removed. You don't have enough power. Plumbing and copper lines are ripped out. So it's just a shell, right? But then if it's an older property, it's the same condition, it's almost abandoned. What is that fixture really worth? Sometimes it's really nothing. So that to improve that building, it'll be too costly. It's actually cheaper to demolish and build new. So what these individuals are seeing for years or decades are leaving it vacant and it's a land bank now. The building on there is worthless. They're just hoping the land value goes up. Hoping is not a good strategy, but they're just hoping it goes up. If I can hold it long enough, real estate always goes up. Eventually my kids or my grandkids will be the beneficiary of that. So those are some of the things that happens in certain areas. If this was investors and fund managers, there's no way it will stay vacant like that. They will repurpose it, sell it for cheaper. There will be transactions on it. So I got to understand these properties must be under a trust, family trust. It could be under generation of individual that's passed it through. Or maybe they just have such a low basis that it doesn't make sense for them to put in $100 a square foot to get $10 rent. So that's some of the biggest reasons why you'll see that. And hopefully this information was helpful. If you like our content, please like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you very much.